Administration Committee to order. Let the minute taker call the roll.
Alderman Sorrentino.
Here.
Alderman Jacob.
Here.
Alderman Woods.
Here.
Alderman Sismarski.
Here.
Alderman Roy Wesley. Alderman Eugene Wesley.
Here.
Alderman Catalano.
Here.
Alderman Messina.
Here.
I declare a quorum. Next, approval of meeting minutes from January 9th, 2020.
Second.
Are there any questions, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. That passes. Next, report and recommendation, Fire District TIF proposal. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yes, as you stated, the Fire District has submitted a proposal for some TIF funding. We began discussing this a few months ago, I believe. They filled out the TIF application as required from any entity requesting funding. The manager and myself went through it, vetted it. It was a very nice narrative describing the project, some of the things they've done to try to, reduce their costs to obtain this ambulance. And so the Fire District is here this evening. They have a few slides I believe they'd like to go through, if it's okay with the chairman.
Sure, absolutely. Love to have him.
Turn it over
Always
to,
welcome.
Turn it over to Chief Burke and Deputy Chief Joel.
Quicker.
Fancy mouse clicker. It's reserved.
We're going to kind of tag team this if it's okay here. I'm going to let
beer.
Chief Joel talk a little bit about the project. He's been kind of in charge of it, doing the spec work and stuff on the proposed new ambulance that we're talking about here. So I'm going to let him do most of the talking here tonight.
All right. Thank you all for your time. Our project is to purchase a new ambulance. It's been ordered. We're looking for financial assistance from the TIF fund, and it would be to buy a new Type 1 NFPA compliant ambulance. The one we're replacing is from 2008. Like I said, it's $300,000 for the total project, and we expect delivery in July or August of this year. Over the past 10 years, our numbers have increased. Our call numbers have increased 40%. Last year was 2,532 calls. 1,525 of them were ambulance calls. This is by far the busiest vehicle in our fleet. And we only expect those demands for service to go up. With development in the city and the fire district, and largely in part to incentives like the TIF district, attracting business, attracting more people to the town and to the fire district. This is a slide of a study we did from 2015 to 2018 of all of our calls. And every blue dot on the map is where we had a call in a 3-year period. You can see it's pretty well spread out among the town, but we do have calls in both of the TIF districts right now. And you can see how close together some of those are to more populated areas of the district and of your city. So the ambulance we're replacing, like I said, that's all right. It's from 2008. We paid $173,000 when we bought it in 2008. Since then, we spent over $140,000 in maintenance to keep it running. It happens with a busy vehicle. The costs only keep going up, and due to the maintenance costs, it's exceeded the value of the unit. It's time to replace it. It has over 4,400 hours of service. It's responded to over 8,000 calls, and it's worked multiple special events from the fireworks to Prairie Fest, the National Nights Out, being in the parades. The new ambulance that we're looking at, it's going to service the Thorndale corridor and the Wooddale Road corridor TIF districts. It's going to replace our 2008 vehicle, and it's also going to protect the rest of the city and the rest of the fire district. The funds that we're requesting are only for the vehicle itself. They're not for personnel, they're not for staffing, and most of the equipment that's on the ambulance we're replacing right now is going to be transferred over to the new ambulance. So that's some of the things we've done to save on costs. Here's a picture of the ambulance we ordered. It looks very close to the one we have right now. They're going to be hard to tell apart, but it's a 2020 NFPA compliant vehicle. Some of the NFPA compliance equipment that's on there is a picture right on the left of a cot loading system. This system with the cot, it's powered and it rolls into the back on kind of like a sked or a sled system. It can lift up to 800 pounds. We do have patients that exceed that weight limit, and we do have patients that are close to that weight limit in town. We have to take care of them. We don't have a choice. So
Hey, Pat,
not only does it help, go ahead, Randy.
just thinking the importance of this. With the old system, I remember I had a resident reach out and tell me she was bigger. And is there a manual process where you guys need to literally carry them from the home to that? Would that help in that process?
Well, this stretcher would help. This stretcher's rated for 800 pounds.
Right,
The ones we have right now are only up to 600, I think.
okay,
So, and to get them onto the stretcher, though, that's all manual. That's all manpower.
okay.
So that's
There's
one of the
nothing on the
reasons-
actual stretcher in the home that might help that
No,
process?
some people do have some kind of lift system in their home, especially
Okay.
if they've been disabled for a while, or they have a hard time getting around, they have stuff to assist them, but most of the time, it just takes people lifting them up and moving them, and we have ways to do it with like lifting mats and
Okay.
conveyance devices that we can slide people around without causing damage or hurting them very
Okay.
much, so.
Thank you.
But this system is just an example of one of the new things we have to get, and this is a $52,000 cot system, so. The total cost, $300,000. It's all the new equipment we have to purchase, like the cot system, and installed. It'll be ready to go once it gets here. Any equipment that we can use from the old ambulance we're taking out of service is gonna get moved over, like the heart monitor, that's another $40,000 piece of equipment. The drugs, the supplies for bandaging, things like that. We were able to reduce the price $20,000 by being part of a cooperative purchase agreement. So we got in the Houston Galveston purchasing agreement, and it was $20,000 less than the Illinois state bid for a new ambulance. We got a discount on that cot system. The $52,000 system is normally $63,000 because we're part of the Illinois Public Risk Fund. So that was discounted right on the purchase price. We got our discount from Ford, because we have a Ford fleet program with our cars and our other ambulance. And then we used some of the FEMA grant that we won for a new radio and communications equipment, computers, radios in the vehicle, so we can communicate with the dispatch center. That's all covered. That's not part of the purchase. So, in our formal proposal, we're requesting $150,000, or half the cost, to be funded from the TIF funds. Obviously, any assistance is going to be appreciated from the TIF or from the city, and we would not refuse the entire cost. But we're making our funding request in good faith, and we hope that splitting the cost is minimal to the council. All the remaining costs of the project, we're gonna have to finance through Itasca Bank, and they've already given us the best possible rate at the time we finance. So any funds we can get from outside of our own having to finance it are gonna decrease the burden on our taxpayers. And we thank you for your consideration.
Alderman Sismarski.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. I know you guys were here earlier in the year. Is there still a referendum coming up on the ballot to raise the taxes on the fire department?
There is. Yep, March 17th, we'll have a referendum on the ballot.
Art?
Thank you. Oh, Alderman Wesley. Eugene Wesley.
I just have one question. Brad, if they put in for this right now, and does that disqualify them for coming for more TIF money? Or is this a one-time, or I'm just asking?
Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, my understanding with pretty much all the city programs like this is that it's done on a case-by-case basis. So again, my understanding would be that they would be eligible to come back, and then we would bring it to the council or the committee, and then you would vet it on a project-by-project basis. So, and I would not believe that this would preclude them from coming forward again over the remaining life of the TIF if they should so desire.
Good.
You have a follow-up?
I was just gonna make a motion, but I see you.
Okay. Alderman Messina?
I know like the city, we have, I believe it's called this, like us, there's a program for maintenance, I forgot the form, SURF, I thought it was SURF, the SURF fund, where we have a program for maintenance, ongoing maintenance, right? And we can project out and forecast when certain vehicles are gonna need to be replaced. And we have a fiscally responsible system that saves that money to make sure we're able to do that. I know we're gonna be asked about the why. So I'm hoping, could you spend a minute talking to me or us about what have you guys done to prepare for this purchase, and why weren't you guys prepared? I mean, it's a 10-year-old fleet, well, let's say 2008, so a 12-year-old vehicle. I mean, it's something that people you would imagine are going to ask, why weren't they prepared for this?
And a great question. I think I can probably answer that. There's some logic with us obviously going out for referendum this year. The average age of the fleet here, all rigs considered, is over 11 years old. We haven't bought a new vehicle. The newest vehicle that we have in the fleet is the last ambulance we bought. That is the busiest rig in the fleet. And the truth of the matter is, and I think we showed you this when we were coming here talking about the referendum, our ambulance here in Wooddale is like the second busiest rig in the whole northeastern part of the county. This ambulance runs more than any other rig just about in this neck of the woods. So the average age of the fleet is over 11 years. The average life expectancy, and again, this is kind of a rule of thumb in the fire service, 7 years is about the replacement time frame for an ambulance. And again, a lot of this has to do with, even though miles, people kind of try to look at like you would on your own car and equate it to miles. For us, it's not miles, it's hours. Engine idle hours. There's a lot of time with these vehicles that sit idle, obviously on a scene or what have you. So it's more driven by the hours than it is the actual miles. So for us, obviously, we're well beyond that seven-year period. In answer to your question,
Right.
why haven't we prepared? Simply no money. There's no other way to say it. Replacement costs, trying to set money aside. We have put all of this stuff on hold, station repairs, vehicle replacements and everything simply because of the funding. Yeah, go ahead.
Alderman Messina, follow.
So I think a fair point to say, I mean, if I jotted it down correctly, the vehicle was purchased, well, you've put in 173,000 in maintenance, and it was purchased for 140,000.
Correct.
And it was purchased for how much?
We paid 173 for it when it
Okay,
was
so my
new.
numbers were reversed, okay.
Yeah, and so we've spent about 140 just on
And the
maintenance.
cost is doubled,
You get to
basically.
that breakover point where the maintenance costs are crazy. And it's not just the maintenance costs, it's the downtime and dependability of the vehicle, quite frankly. I mean, obviously, you need a vehicle that starts and you know, it goes and gets where you need it to go and be able to transport, obviously, patients to the hospital and so forth. So this has become a dependability issue too with this vehicle. It's constantly in the shop, so.
Thank you, you've answered my question, thank
thanks.
you.
Mayor, please.
Just so everyone watching understands, when we created the TIF district, we could have easily cut fire district, school district, library, everybody out. We purposely put them in so we could use some of these funds to help out those other taxing bodies and move the city forward.
I would also note that that's not a given. We were contemplating, or we were assuming that the TIF would be successful. It has indeed been successful to date, so we would not have these funds to choose to share if the TIF were not successful to date.
Alderman Jacob.
Two questions. First one for Brad. Now, I was under the assumption that, or maybe I misunderstood on the TIF, I didn't realize it could be used for equipment. I thought it had to be really used for like buildings, like building projects. Now, this is a vehicle, we're buying a piece of equipment.
Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so the statute is a little bit vague in that regard. It says capital costs or capital expenditures. We have ran this by Bond Council and TIF Council, and they are both in agreement that this would be an eligible expense should the council decide to move forward with it. There does have to be nexus, though. So, you know, if they wanted to buy an airplane, for example, like that, there's really no point to an airplane in the TIF, right? So there has to be some nexus, and emergency EMS calls to the TIF, to the 390, you know, whatnot, that there is a nexus there that is a logical conjugation of the use and the area, so.
Okay, and then the next question is to the fire department. For some reason, the ambulance we have, and just looking at other departments, it seems like a lot of them have the newer ambulances are a bigger model or a larger truck. Is that correct? Or
So, you're probably talking like the international chassis, the big kind of.
yeah, I think Elmhurst might have them or something. I'm not
Actually, quite a few of the departments had them. I know Addison had them for their fleet. The reality of the internationals was at least in our estimation, was a little bit of a fad. They came into vogue and a lot of departments got them. The part of the problem was dependability with them. Part of the problem was the height of the chassis as it related to curbs. There was a lot of issues with the way the saddle tanks, the fuel tanks rode and you know, curbs and things like that, hitting curbs, hitting snowbanks, damage to vehicles. Many of the departments have gone completely away from them, again, back to the Ford chassis like you saw in the drawing here, for that very reason. Not to mention some maintenance dependability issues.
Follow-up?
So it was never really that those were more durable or heavy duty for, you know, it last longer
I
than.
think that was the original thought, but I think it proved itself that it really wasn't. They weren't getting any more life out of them. In fact, they were having more issues with damage to the vehicles because of the way that vehicle's designed and the way it sat. It was a lower profile, and there were issues with that. From a maintenance perspective, it wasn't any more dependable than.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Sismarski?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to authorize the TIF money for an ambulance.
Second.
For 2020, $150,000.
We have a motion, we have a second. Are there any other questions? Okay, there being none, roll call?
Alderman Sorrentino?
Yes.
Alderman Jacob?
Yes.
Alderman Woods?
Yes.
Alderman Sismarski?
Yes.
Alderman Eugene Wesley?
Yes.
Alderman Catalano?
Yes.
Alderman Messina?
Yes.
That passes. Thank you, Chief.
Great, thank you.
Chief.
Very much appreciated.
Hopefully we get to see it out front of City Hall when it shows up. Yeah. I don't want to be the first one in it, but no. No, not riding in the back.
Okay, sure, if Alderman Messina has one
So,
trick
I know
question.
we're talking about something completely different going on the ballot for referendum, right? I know we don't need to discuss it. I'm just talking about dates. Are we talking about this upcoming election, or are we talking about our consolidated election, which would be April of next year, or this upcoming one?
No, it'll be on the ballot. The referendum question's on the ballot on the 17th of next month.
Okay.
Yeah. If there's any questions that anybody has on that referendum, I'd be willing to answer them now if you have
Yeah,
questions.
well, it's not on the agenda, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Thank you.
I know that rule.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, next, credit card processing fees. Mr. Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one of the things that we're looking at, we're basically, as you may recall, during strategic planning, kind of with the new ERP, kind of looking at everything, bidding everything out. One of the things that we knew was going to have to change was the credit card processing, the merchant services. So this is kind of that conversation, because of our current structure, we're not going to be able to import and move over to our new system. So we need to have some decision points from you guys on what that's going to look like going forward. First, a little bit of brief history. Before 2008, the city did not accept credit cards. So sometime early to middle of 2008, we started accepting credit cards here at the city. We used Matrix for the merchant services and for that provider. We've been with them since 2008. As referenced in the memo, we have price shopped them a couple times, and they they came back with the best rates, and again, service has been fine. So there wasn't really much of a motivation to look to move until we're going over to Munis, and that's really precipitating the momentum for this change. From 2008 to April of 2017, again, we accepted credit cards and we paid all transaction fees. So you came in, used a credit card, we just put an expense line item in the budget. It was a cost of doing business for the city. During the fiscal 18 budget conversation, which would have been February of 2017, It was proposed to add a $1 fee for all transactions. So since May of 2017, we've been doing the $1 on all transactions, online and in person. Except for the Metro lot, because that's $1.50, and that didn't really make a lot of sense.
Alderman Sismarski? you have
It
a
was,
question?
Mr. Wilson, have you had any feedback on that at all? Nobody said anything, or? You're always gonna have somebody. I
Yeah,
just-
you know, initially we got, you know, a couple, you know, snide comments here or there, but.
We're not done
Um,
making money.
Nothing, yeah, nothing really, nothing too crazy.
Okay.
You know, especially, you know, if you call and pay ComEd or NICOR over the phone, it's $3.95, so they're like, oh, it's $1, and people move on. We have about 700 people per month that pay their water bill online and in person, with a credit card. We send out about 4,500 to 4,800 bills, so it's a pretty decent percentage of the population that pay, with their credit card each
Wait,
month.
Thank you.
So, kind of where we're going tonight, and I want to be clear with what we're going to discuss on the next slide, is those fees would go in as systems go live. So right now, we're live in Munis with things such as Metro parking, like the Georgetown parking, some of those things. Building permits, everything like surrounding the building permit environment, commercial occupancy, contractor registration. That stuff is all still ran through Munis and will be until Intergov, or sorry, it's still ran through Springbrook and will be until Intergov goes live, probably, 9 to 12 months from now. Utility
Hold on.
billing.
Mayor, please, you have a question?
Yeah, so you're talking about permit fees and whatnot. So somebody who's getting a permit pays $1, even though his permits, you know, if he's got a big permit, 10,000 or 5,000, we're paying anywhere between 1.75 and 2.5% on 10,000, 5,000. So really $1 doesn't cover it, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So again, the new fees would go in place once items go live in Munis and Tyler. So really two questions in the middle bullet there are, do we want to fully cover our costs or do we want to partially cover our costs? And the answer can be different for utility bills or like the building permit types of things. So if we say, hey, you know what, utility bills, those are mostly, you know, resident items, so we want to charge a lower rate for those versus building permits, we can do that. Or we can charge the same, like now we do the $1, we can do a blanket fee for everything. So that's one thing to take into consideration, is you can have 2 different or even 3 different merchant IDs and fee silos, depending on how you want to structure it.
So I have a question. So going back to the water bills, though, then we have the commercial versus the residential. So that would be a separate silo, because I'm assuming commercial water bill can be $10,000 and higher versus 200.
It could be, but if you're talking about utility bills, that's one tranche. So if you're doing utility rate, it has to be all utility bills. It's actually the last bullet on there, is we can't charge residents and contractors or businesses different rates. If it's a utility bill, it has to be in that silo.
And so that was
It's,
the point I was trying to get to, that we can't differentiate that much within the categories, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mayor, please.
So I have been bothering Brad on this because, so,
Board?
well, I wanted to figure out exactly what's going on. $1, from, you know, having a business and using a credit card machine, I know 1% or $1 usually doesn't cover it. But then as we got more into it, he started telling me permits and all this other stuff. But we have like parking over in Georgetown and some of these things, just looking at the numbers and going over with Brad, break even would be somewhere between $1.65 and $2 for that type of stuff. But then you have totally different situation with contractors and all that stuff. And the rates varied what was it, like 1.7 to 2.5 on the permit. So on a $5,000 permit, you're charging $1, when even at 2%, we can do the math, we're losing money on every permit. And, you know, we shouldn't be losing money, we should at least break even, but. And Brad, when we talked, you said we could charge for permits, whatever, because everybody has a different card, right? So whatever card they have, it's a different rate to us. We either could, or we have to set like a 1.5 or 2% rate or something. I'm still a little unclear on that kind of stuff.
Mr. Wilson, you want to clear that up?
Oh, sure, that's actually an excellent segue to my next slide. No, it's great. So there's really three options. There's the utility fee program, which has the lowest overall credit card interchange rate. Couple things is that there's no fees allowed with that, and then so we wouldn't be allowed to charge the dollar, a penny, nothing. But it's the lowest rate. I mean, and so, but then the city would have to pay / absorb / eat / budget for that entire amount, whatever that amount would be. Bless you. Which that's what we were doing the first 9 years that we were doing credit cards, was we were doing option 1, which was we were getting some of the lowest rates, but then we were absorbing the entire amount. The middle one, the government rate, that's what we're doing currently in effect. So it's not the best rate possible, but it's also better than what just a typical, retail establishment could get. And we could charge a flat fee similar to our current practice, so that would be where, the $1, $1.75, $2 would come into play. So we would still pay monthly fees for the credit card processing, but the theory would be that whatever we collect would offset that to get us as close to zero as possible. The last one would be the percentage, which would be, and that one is actually set by the merchant. And so when the card is ran, they're going to assess the fee that, they've set that's going to be applicable for those types of cards. And then they deal with all the fees, and they deal with Visa, MasterCard, and everything. And that particular one, the user pays the fees, and the merchant absorbs and pays the bill. And so the city actually doesn't pay any fees under that scenario. But it is the highest rate to the end user, but lowest cost to the city. So it's kind of a teeter-totter. The top one is the lowest rate to the end user, highest fees to the city. The middle one we can kind of balance a little bit. And the last one is the highest rate to the end user, but the lowest cost to the city. And
Alderman
again-
Catalano, you had a question?
Yeah, so on the no fee, for instance, what is the city going to end up paying each year as far as credit card fees? Because I remember last budget, we were looking, well, the budget before that, we were looking at $30,000. I mean, are we still going to be paying those crazy amounts?
Mr. Wilson?
So, yes, but no. So building permits are not going to be allowed to be ran through that program. So we would have to pick 2 or 3 for the building permits. So there would be some fees, probably, without looking too hard, or I haven't looked, I'd say probably somewhere in the $15,000 to $20,000 range for the utility bills. Maybe as low as 10, depending on utilization. But that would be something, that we would have to put into the budget. But again, the building permits, though, would have to go into one of those other two categories.
Alderman Messina? You had a question?
So if there were to be a motion, we could split it and have a utility fee option for utility bills, and we could have a percentage rate for permitting fees.
Correct.
I'd like to make the motion to assess a utility fee program for utility bills and the percentage option for permitting.
So there's still going to be a fee, though, right? for the utilities?
Now, for the utility, there will be, but it's minimal, you see? It's the lowest. But if you-
No, you have to
Okay,
set
do
a
we-
fee.
It's the lowest, I said.
You want to repeat the motion, and do we have a second?
Sure.
Go ahead, if you could.
I'd like to make a motion to assess the utility fee program option for our utility billing and the percentage option for those, for
Everything
permitting,
other than
rather.
Utility?
What's that?
No.
For everything other than utilities?
Correct. The percentage for other, anything other than you, go ahead, man.
Okay, well, there's a motion, so is there a
Yeah.
second? No second.
Okay.
Mayor, Police?
Okay, just so we're clear. Besides utilities, we have the train parking lot, and we also have like residents get permit parking like in Georgetown. So I would think we want to treat all the residents the same and have that lowest fee, whatever it, and we have to set a number on that, correct, Brad? Right now, it's
I
$1.
was just gonna ask.
And we don't even break even, because I believe the train station, when we went over it, train station, we were collecting $4,600, but we were paying almost $700 in fees, so we were actually collecting $3,900 or something like that. I think the end number was $3,900. So, and we were only collecting, out of that $700 in fees, we were only collecting about $85 or $90. I'm just going off the top of my head,
Is
I
that a
don't recall.
question?
No, no, but, so the question becomes, what's the number for all the residents and the train and the parking? That's one, and then it becomes something else for the permits. I think that's what we're trying to do here. Is that correct?
Yeah, I just,
Mr. Wilson, do you understand the question? What the?
Yeah, yes, I do. The train station, the Metro lot, that one is really wonky to try to roll into this, because it's $1.50 anyways. And then if you add a quarter to it, then it's really $1.75 parking, so that rate is set by ordinance, so
Okay.
for right now, I'd say we leave the train station, the Metro parking lot out of it.
Okay,
What you're referring to directly, though, is the quarterly passes that the hang placards that they purchase through the finance department. So those, the Georgetown passing, the on-street parking permit that they have, yeah, those could be in their own silo by themselves as well. So you could have three. You could have the utility bills and whatever you want to set that rate at. You could have the parking passes, the hang placards, have a rate for those, which would legitimately be lower than the utility rate, and then have the permitting items at a third rate.
So, when we're doing this, well, here, Alderman Smarsky, you had your hand up?
Thank you. Where does the city have to be to break even? I mean, we're not, obviously, it's, I don't know, they're all over the place with numbers, with different places and different applications. So where does the city have to be to break even, just to,
about $1.75.
Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, on the utility bills, it's looking like it's gonna be somewhere between $1.75 and $2, based on final rates. For like the Metro parking passes, the hang placards, that's probably $1 to $1.25. And then on the intergov stuff, the building permits, the COCs, the percentage one would make the most sense, because you have a $15,000 building permit that's gonna cost you $500, or a $150 rental housing inspection that's gonna cost you $3. So that one's all over the map.
So under, just
so-
I'll let you follow.
just a follow-up. So you're saying $1.25, $1.75, then percentage of, so that would be where we wouldn't have to, there's nothing, the city's not losing out on anything. We're not dishing out extra money. I would make a motion on that, if you're up for it. Or to re-amend your motion.
Alderman Messina, you have a question for him?
I just want you to understand, right? So if I have a fee, I'm pulling a permit, and I have to pay you $8,000, I can promise you I'm only doing it for the miles. If you are having a permit fee of $8,000 and you're not budgeting for a fee, to me, that's insane. Had the opportunity to buy a car, and they said, we won't pay you a fee. I would have been a complete moron not to put that on my credit card and get all the miles and get all the points. So we really need to make sure that we separate that, because somebody that has an $8,000 permit, I can guarantee you, they have an extra couple bucks to pay that. I wholeheartedly agree, we need to take care of our residents, but even as a resident, if I'm building a project and my fee's gonna be $5,000, and I gotta put it on a credit card, I have probably bigger concerns than that.
Right. Thank you. Alderman Jacob?
So the utility, number one, utility fee program, so there, we wouldn't even charge $1, because it says no fees allowed, is that correct?
Correct.
If we used it.
If we used it, but right now, right now, we're currently using the government rate,
Is that true, Mr.?
is that true?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And right now, for the building permits, for everything, we're using the government rate, and we're using just $1 flat fee for everything, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So just one comment. So would it make sense then to just, and is this where everybody's going, to make the parking and the utility bill, then just change that to $2? And then the permit, anything under the building department,
Percentage.
permits or rental inspections and all that goes to the percentage, so that we don't want like 50 different silos to be charging different things, right? 2 is more than enough. One takes care of citizens and the other one's really a business proposition. And it's unfair to allow, whether they're residents or not, to, let's say, get over on the city and benefit by paying their bill that
Is that
way.
your motion?
Would that be fair? No, I'm gonna save the motion for Randy, because he started the ball rolling. Alderman Sorrentino, you have a question?
Yeah, it's pretty much a statement along with the question. This is, the residents and people that are doing the building, they have an option on the payment, correct? They could pay by check,
Mr. Wilson?
by cash.
Sure, anybody can pay with
All right,
cash.
so by using a
or
credit
check.
card, it's a convenience fee that they're paying for using a credit card. I can't figure out how their convenience fee becomes our inconvenience fee. It's a choice they're making. Why are we paying for it? Let them pay it themselves, or pay by check. I don't think we should pay any of it. That ought to stir it up a bit.
Sounds like there's a slight slight consensus, so I'll make the motion that we go to the
Second.
government rate for utility billing and anything to do with parking. Does that make $2, right?
Second.
And then the percentage rate for anything out of the building departments, rental
Percentage.
inspections, all those issues. And that,
Utilities
2 and percentage.
2% for anything of all the permit stuff is because.
Mayor, please, if you,
Just so everybody understands, the city's gonna get charged depending what kind of card so you have Visa, you get 2.5% charge to the city. I have,
American Express.
American Express, and mine's only charging 1.5%. So I'm gonna get charged 1.5%, right, Brad? Because when you showed me, you had like a list of 30 there, right? So it could,
Is
depending
that
on your
correct, Mr.
card.
Wilson?
Yeah, so I don't know what the fees are. What I can say is that every card does have a different rate.
Right.
I mean, there's probably 70 different rates, anywhere from, secured debit card to the World's Point Plus. Those can push 5% if you're using World Points Plus corporate cards, so.
Alderman
And
Messina?
then it goes back to your point, right? So if you have a competitive rate on a card, you're gonna do the honest math and say, I'd be an idiot not to pay with my credit card. I'll be assessed the fee that I am, right?
Right.
We wanna discourage that behavior, to Alderman Sorrentino's point.
Right. And anybody using it for that big a purchase, you would assume that they're doing the math equation, and
Oh,
it's to their benefit one way or the other, whether it's a timing issue for them or a percentage or gift issue, whatever it is.
And our
So-
taxpayers are paying for it.
Right.
We want that.
So that is my motion. Was there?
Yes, a second.
Alderman Sismarski, is second.
Yeah, I did.
Any other questions? Alderman Jacob, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, just, now the train station, is that changing too, or
No.
you're keeping that, we're keeping that the same? We're keeping that separate? Okay, I just wanted to make sure with the motion.
Could you just rephrase that motion again? A little confused.
2 and
Okay,
percentage.
All the utility billing will go to the government rate format and charge a flat fee of $2 for every transaction. And that would include if we load in the parking lot, or the Georgetown parking and other parking issues. That would be where we would put that, whether we're doing that today or not. That would be the avenue or the silo that would go in. And the other silo would be the percentage, which would be just charged, whatever the card charges, that percentage, whether it's 1.5, 3.5, 5.5, 2.5. to the end user of the card, and that would be for all building department issues, rental property, and all those other fees associated with that. Alderman Jacob?
One more question. Now, what about the police department, like their ticket fees and stuff? That's not included in any of this, is that correct?
Alderman Catalano?
Just one question. I just want the residents to know that in the past, the residents used to pay $30,000 for fees. So we're doing a fair thing for the residents, that they don't have to come up with that kind of money. You know, especially if people want to use their credit card because they want to rack up points to go on vacation. I don't think it's fair for the residents to pay for that. So this is a fair way to handle it. So, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it really is equitable, given the numbers you were talking about, 800 people and 4,600 bills, right? So a low percentage of people and the other people are paying by check or cash. So, yeah. If there's no further questions, roll call?
Alderman Sorrentino?
Yes.
Alderman Jacob?
Yes.
Alderman Woods?
Yes.
Alderman Sizmarsky?
Yes.
Alderman Eugene Wesley?
Yes.
Alderman Catalano?
Yes.
Alderman Messina?
Yes.
That passes. Next items to be considered at future meetings, budget hearing February 27th, can hardly wait. Is there anything anybody would like to add? No? I'll make a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All,
28th,
March.
it says February on my paper,
February 28th.
27th.
There you are, 28th.
It's right here.
The budget
Mr.
meeting,
Mr. Wilson?
yes, to present the budget, I guess the budget hearing in a vacuum is the public hearing with the notice and all of that. That's gonna be early April, but sometimes the budget hearing is referred to as the meetings where the budget is read and debated, so it's a phrase of art. So.
No pun intended. Okay. I'm going back to my motion to adjourn.
Yep, so moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
I'd like to call to order Public Works Committee meeting. Minute taker, please take note that the same council members are present. Next, I need approval of the minutes of January 23rd, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Any corrections? No corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is report and recommendation, a resolution adopting the City of Wooddale complete street policy. That is my motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions on the motion? Mr. Woods?
Yeah.
Alderman Woods.
Alan, could you give me like the Reader's Digest version of what that means?
Go ahead.
Absolutely, I'd love to. Essentially, what a complete streets policy boils down to is a procedural approach to roadway design. It just means that while we're planning a roadway project, we tend to incorporate aspects of other modes of travel, like bike, pedestrian. We take those into consideration, and if it's cost feasible, we look to include those into the project. The real incentive here is that we get extra points for federal funding through the Surface Transportation Program for having a complete streets policy and incorporating those aspects. So that's one of the reasons why we want to have this in place.
So if I could follow up, so the big thing is to incorporate other means of transportation or mobility, right? Whether that's walking, bike, jogging, skateboard, whatever it is, bus lanes.
Go ahead, Director.
Exactly, yes.
Thank you.
Whatever cost feasible.
Okay, any more questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, next is HR Green, proposal for 5G small cell consultant services. And, go
Thank you,
ahead.
Chairman. We actually have a few representatives from HR Green, so with that, I'll kick it over to Ron and Ken.
Go ahead. Yeah, you can sit up on the table up there. It's more comfortable, you can sit down.
Well, I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to talk over 5G and 5G future, and I thank Ron for inviting me and for us being here. Our presentation, I do have copies. If anybody wants a hard copy, there's ones that you can have and take those with you. For those of you that, I think most of you probably know, HR Green, and it's the clicker.
Fire department took off with it.
The other one, the mouse.
No, you gotta use the mouse, it's right there.
Ah, okay, very good.
We don't use the clicker to click,
There we
we
go.
use the mouse.
And I think most of you know HR Green, but we're a 105-year-old engineering firm with 14 offices and there's a reason I'm getting to that part of it, but 14 offices in 9 states. And we're glad to have multiple offices in the Chicago area. Tonight, I want to briefly talk about Wooddale's 5G future. And the first thing I want to do is just provide some context so that, you may know part of this or all of this, but I just want to make sure we kind of all have the same basic knowledge. So I'll go through that quickly, but I just want to have kind of a basic context of 5G and what that means and those sorts of things. And then from that context, I just want to provide some practical steps to move forward on your 5G future. You know, first, just talking about context, I bring this a lot to talk about how 5G is a national issue. I mean, it's a national rollout, it's an international rollout. These are just some of our clients, and just to tell you kind of how quickly this is moving, this slide's probably just a month or two old, and it's already out of date. We've already got several more that we could put up here of folks that are communities that are talking about what do they need to do for 5G, what do they need to do to prepare for 5G, to manage some parts of 5G. Again, this part of the context is just, this is a major thing that's happening across the world and across the country and around here. So the second context that I want to talk about is what is 5G and what's the future of 5G look like. So 5G, and again, I'll move through this quickly. If you have any questions you want to ask me about later, feel free, but I want to move fairly quickly though. But 5G is a combination of infrastructure and technology. And one thing to know about 5G is that it is a transformational change. And so, you know, like 2G, our phones, you could make phone calls. 3G, you could get text. 4G moved on to things like location and connectivity and all that. Those were incremental changes. 5G is actually a transformational change. And so in technology and telecommunications, it's transformational. And the reason it's transformational is there's a technological transformational change, and that's high speed, high capacity, low latency, those sorts of things. And so there's a technology way that it's transformational. And the way that the data is used, the way that data can be interconnected, that's all, you know, smart city, safety, medicine, efficiency, business, logistics. Those are all the way that 5G can connect all of that. The technological way that it can affect all that is truly a transformational change. It's not like those incremental changes. And it's also transformational in the infrastructure. A lot has to happen in infrastructure. And when it happens in infrastructure, again, that's a transformational change too. So, yeah.
So maybe we could just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, you were sorry. Got my shoulder.
Hold on, Mr. Go ahead.
So could we take one step back?
Sure.
I know the answer, but my friends, some of us may not, but can you explain what the impact of low latency may mean to services?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So in the technology and the way that the infrastructure will be, and I'll just talk about that more a little bit, the way that it allows for much higher speed, much higher capacity, and then the low latency. Low latency is like when you click something on your computer and the thing spins. You know, that delay, that's latency. And with this technology, particularly in places where the infrastructure is robust, it takes that down to, for all intents and purposes, it takes that down to just basically zero. Now, there's important reasons for that coming up. I mean, when I talk about a few more things, you'll see why that's so important. But again, that's a huge change that we just haven't gotten to before that this technology will allow. So,
Thank you. Yes.
yeah. And there's this, again, I've got some, just some pictures here. So 5G, and we talk about the infrastructure, and we talk about, there are variables of what it can look like. There's variables of what the infrastructure will be. And so just kind of a play on words, what does the 5G future look like? Well, there's options of what it'll look like, and I'll kind of get to what your options are there and how you can manage that. One of the things that it does, and I know that the writing is tiny on this, but what this is getting at is that with one thing that 5G will do is, along with those bigger picture things that will change in this transformation, there's also, that just kind of shows just on one pole, just on one light pole, a lot of the different things. And again, you can't really read that, but there's sensors and there's data, there's a lot that can happen for within the community, a lot of tools that the city will have, because 5G will allow, that platform, that infrastructure will allow for a lot of ways to, again, sensors is a great example, and talking with our friends in police and fire, you know, those things matter. I mean, they're not, some of those are cool things, some of those are great, they're nice things to have, but some of it is, some of this transformation can really be powerful, can really be important. And also this provides, again, just in context, this provides, you know, kind of what it can look like too. Again, there's different options of what it can look like, but this shows some of the possibility and then also some of what it can look like. So then, Alderson Messina, this kind of gets to your question too. Another thing that is coming is autonomous vehicles. They are coming off I mean, they are being made, they're being built. And because of that zero latency or low latency, that technology makes things like autonomous vehicles possible. Because if you think about it, if you have cars that are either driving themselves or have a lot of their, you know, autonomous what's going on in the car, if there's something in there spinning, that's not good for anybody, right? And so you have to have, you know, zero latency or low latency for this technology even to work. But I just bring that up because that's a scale, right? I mean, it's if you have the technology and you have the infrastructure and it provides for zero latency or low latency, then you can have things like autonomous vehicles. If you don't, you can't.
Go ahead.
Just one thing, not to help sell the value of this, but I've seen it in another city where if we think about our world and think about like the maintenance, the predictive maintenance that's possible with sensors, we talked about just approving help on a fire truck. Well, if there were sensors on that truck, they probably could have done a lot of that maintenance ahead, and some of those problems that probably cost a lot more money because they had to wait till it broke, they would have known. And so we could probably start to utilize some of that sensor tech, IoT sensor technology on some of our own fleet, and this will allow us to do that. Sorry to,
No.
I'm not trying to do your job, I just,
Well,
in our context, it helps.
I appreciate that. And if, you know, if you think about, again, the reason this is transformational is because when you have that kind of connectivity, when you have the way to have, you know, sensors connected or Internet of Things or devices connected, you start to have those possibilities where you just don't if you don't have that technology in place. And then that gets to Internet of Things. This is just a graph, and again, I apologize for the writing being so tiny, but this is showing the increase in number of devices that are connected. And so the years, we're starting to see this. That graph is already coming up, and we're already starting to see that. So this is actual, like almost real time of how that is increasing. But we're having the technology of interconnected devices, the IoT, we're having that being developed now, but that's being developed for the platform of 5G because 5G is going to provide the infrastructure by which those will connect, if that makes sense. So, again, we're just talking about some context stuff here. You know, infrastructure, like I said, one of the transformations is infrastructure. And for 5G interconnectedness, for all these, for there to be this kind of canopy of technology, you have to have small cells, and this kind of points out some things. You have to have small cells. Those are antennas. Those basically have to become about every block. And so, and for there to be the network for this to work, it has to be basically by block, or roughly. All these have to be connected by fiber. You hear a lot of different, well, could we do this, or could we do that, or satellites? They're connected by fiber. Because the whole concept is to be able to increase capacity, be able to increase speed, and the way to do that is to bring it into fiber. Again, this context all matters kind of in some suggestions, but, and then the faster, the lower latency, and you know.
Hold on, Mayor, go ahead.
Yeah.
I got a dumb question. I'm not as computer savvy as Randy here. But everything has to be connected by fiber, but then everything they talk about is wireless.
Right. Right. So the way that works, that's a good question. So the way that works is that you have, the cells are what are going to be the way we understand wireless. And so the cells every block. But to be able to get the speed and capacity, those cells have to be connected by fiber. Or you just can't get the capacity and the speed because fiber's, for the foreseeable future, fiber's the way to be able to do that. Yeah. And again, the increase in devices, is the deployment, the number of devices that can connect, the 5G IoT devices. And then just kind of one rule of thumb is basically there's twice as many small cells as streetlights in a full deployment. So there, again, this is a context because this matters in talking about what you can do and what you should do. But that's kind of a way to have scope. The picture up there on the right is what this could look like. And one of the things that, again, we'll talk about later, this is context, it doesn't have to look like that, but just providing context of what it can look like that will lead to some things that you might want to consider. Also, just as context, there's also a structure that we're working under. FCC, back last year, had decided that 5G was a matter of national competitiveness, meaning it's being deployed across the world, and if the United States falls behind, then that would put the United States behind in this technology. And so the FCC, recognizing that this is an issue of national competitiveness, went through and said, one problem would be is that if each city, each community, if they had their own fees and rules, that would slow way down how this, because it would, right? I mean, because that would be so complex that it would slow it way down. So they came up with a set of rules that they said this will apply across the country. And then the states, a lot of states, including Illinois, followed suit. You have some examples up there of what that means. And again, this is context, and we'll talk about what you can do with this. But it's context, so they created a shot clock, meaning you only have so much time to apply or to respond to permits. They set fees, which again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then there's restrictions on fees that I just want to hit a little briefly in a second. And then also they limit the aesthetic review that you can have. So, there's questions about did they overreach? There's questions about is that fair? But that's as context, that's where we are right now.
Alderman Jacob?
Yeah, on the slide before this, when you showed the pole with all those devices on it, but when we first started out where it said wireless Fi, it was what does the future look like?
Mm-hmm.
It just had just one light, one street or street sign with just one little device on it, and you didn't see any wires.
Right.
So was that wireless there on that one picture, or is that?
No, actually, so great question. So we'll get to in a little bit of what some of your options are, but there, this is an example, and in that first graphic, one of the examples was if it's unregulated, then and folks can come in and just put up whatever they want to, versus we have a certain way that we want this to look and a certain type of pole that we want to use, and so that's what we're going to steer everyone to. Those become some of your choices if you are proactive.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Let's see. And then, but so having said that, there are ways that you can retain control, though. And we view this in terms of defense and offense. There's certain things you want to play defense on, certain things you want to manage, like what the poles look like what happens here right away. There's certain things that you want to play defense on, but what this technology will bring and what this technology can do, it's going to matter in the communities that adopt it. And that's going to be a competitive advantage, and that could attract businesses and residences. So there's reasons to play offense too. So we view it as in terms of kind of a healthy balance of offense and defense. And there are things you can do, and this is ways that you can retain control because the FCC and the state did come through and make rules. But there are things that you can do where you can put in your policy ways to control the things that are important to you. If aesthetics, we'll get to what those things are, but you can put in policy things that you want to manage and control. You can manage aesthetics as long as you're being fair and consistent. You can establish standards as long as you're being fair and consistent. And there are health and safety things that are being talked about and are being dealt with right now, and you can actually manage those too. So even within the context of the FCC guidelines and the state guidelines, there are things that you can control, and we recommend that you are proactive. And we'll-
Alderman Messina.
You brought up a good point that I think needs to be reiterated, right? 5G is a competitive advantage, and as we talk about bringing development to Wooddale, especially in our industrial park, and you think about the manufacturing, that is going to be a competitive differentiator, and you see it now, to your point, advertised, but not enough, that this gives us a competitive advantage over surrounding cities.
We work across the country, and that is just a reality. I mean, the connectivity you have, whether it's fiber, broadband, and then 5G, that has become a differentiator.
Well, it's your system, sorry. It's how the systems work, and if you're processing things, right? I know Amex, I read something about this where Amex made a strategic decision to move to a city specifically because their servers needed to go at a certain speed. I think about that for us, not that those kind of businesses, or even the predictive stuff we talked about, the sensoring for the manufacturing piece, that's huge. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and these are examples of defense, right? Because there's defense and offense. Alderman, we're talking about offense things that are relevant. These are examples of defensive things you can manage. RF, just that's radio frequency emissions, and so again, these are things you can manage. These are things that we recommend that you're proactive on managing, because you want to have the offense right. You need to have the defense that sets it up right. And the thing is, we have to be proactive. And just as some examples, it's the way the FCC set it up was they said that if you don't have things in place by the time you start getting permits, then you have to approve the permits. I think there's some debate about how that would work. We're not lawyers, I'm not a lawyer, but I think there is some debate about how that works. But that is something to keep in mind, is that there can be an urgency there, because if you're going to manage the defense parts, but if you don't have anything in place when the permits start coming in, that's a little dicey on how you have to respond. And it's starting to happen now that some cities are being overwhelmed with permits. Just to give you a couple quick examples there in the picture, the one with the mountains in the back, that's out in California, or I'm sorry, in Colorado, and that is Centennial, and this is a representation. That's actually not what's in place yet, but when the provider came in and said, this is what we want to do, and came with the permits, that's what they had. And that city said, wait a minute, that's getting in the way of the view of our mountains, so that's not what we're going to do. And so then they went to manage that. What you see on the lower right there is example of permits in Houston, and they are coming in, and that's examples of permits that are coming in Houston as we speak. So it's happening. So my point is that there is some urgency to being proactive to get the right things in place for defense, but then that sets you up for offense. Again, this is just another example of if you don't manage it, and if you don't say here's what the rules are, then you have to accept what anybody brings. It's just that simple. And those are examples that you don't want to see happen. So from that context, and so those were all contextual, right? Those are all different context things that want to make sure we're on the same page about context, about what's happening. And then so here's some recommendations that we make. And step one is that you need to get your policies right. If you're going to have the defense right to be able, and there's an offense part of this too, but if you're going to have those things right, you kind of have to get your framework, your structure, your baselines in place. And these are examples where you're maximizing within that framework, you're maximizing your community control. It's ordinance and policies, having design guidelines, so you're protecting what aesthetics things you want to. The NEAR certification, non-ionizing, I can't remember the terminology, but that's for health concerns, to be able to say there are ways within the FCC guidelines that you can manage that. There's ways that you can control that, but you have to have those in your policies. And then they also set fees, and those fees may or may not apply to Wooddale. If they don't, then you can actually, as long as you're fair, consistent, and as long as you have documentation, you can actually set the fees that cover your costs. If not, you have to take the default. So again, step one is just implement small cell policies and get your policies right. And, so one of the things we want to do is manage above ground, the aesthetics, what it looks like, what the layout are. These are all examples. These are all examples of different ways it was done. The standalone pole, if you look in the second, the one second to the left, that's problematic, right? Because there's something before it and something after it, but because there was no rules, they just came in and put up another one for the small cell stuff. Well, that's just when you don't have your policies in place. But those are all examples of things that actually obviously are in place across the country. And you want to manage the ground. I want to talk about this just for a second. Again, this is defense. And one of the things that I'm concerned about with this rollout of technology, again, with all this infrastructure and all these cells and fiber has to connect them, one of the things we have to pay attention to as communities is we want to make sure we don't lose our right-of-way. Because if there's 4 providers and they all are going to all these cells, you start chewing up right-of-way really quickly. And so managing above the ground for aesthetics and all that, but you also want to manage your right-of-way. Because there's good ways to do this, and there's good ways to get this done. It's just you want to make sure you're doing it what's best for Wooddale and not just saying, okay, whatever happens, happens. So managing below the ground. And there's some aesthetics with that too, of the way things would look and where they would be. Do you want to just spend another moment on defense for the health concerns? Health concerns are all over the map. There's plenty of science that says everything's fine. There's plenty of science that says that everything's not fine. You get on the internet, that's the last place you want to go because there's everything about everything and who knows what those sources even are. But within what you can do, this is an example of one of our clients where this pole went up and unfortunately it was aimed right at that house. And it was higher than the frequencies or higher than the emissions that are allowed within the FCC guidelines, and it was pointed right at a house. Well, we looked at it and said, wait. And we went to the providers and said, are you sure this is what you want to do right here? And they were like, actually, that was just a mistake. We went off Google Earth. And I think it was really, I think that was an honest response. So they decided to move it. Well, they went off Google Earth and moved it over to the trees. Well, when you see what's actually on the ground, they were aiming it right at the playground. We went back and said, are you sure this is what you want to do? And they said, we didn't know the playground was there. And I believe them, I really do. So that NEAR report and what you can put in your policies are ways to manage, because the FCC has given guidelines, and if you use those guidelines, and if you work with the providers in those guidelines, there are ways to manage this topic. I do want you to know, though, that the topic does come up. And a lot of times the topic comes up with things that aren't accurate because the science is still working out. But within the FCC guidelines, there are ways to manage this, and there is good data and good information on how to manage it. And we recommend that on the defense part, that you work with providers to say, we want to make sure that our goals for this topic are met, and I have yet to see the providers not be willing to do that. So that's step one. I know I'm going quickly.
One question.
I'm sorry, sure.
Well, my question is, what is the coverage in the United States for G5 right now? Do we know?
Yes. So in the U.S., there are 25 cities that have some level of rollout, as of when I looked at statistics a week or two ago. So 25 cities, none of those are completely covered. A lot of them are NFL stadiums. Minneapolis for the Super Bowl was one of them. So there is 5G in 25 cities. I don't think any of those are 100% covered by any means. And outside of that, it's still being worked on.
Alderman Jacob.
Would this, all this technology, would this make it easier to have hotspots throughout the city so you have pretty much everybody would have internet access at all times?
That's a great question. And the answer is, if you set your goals as to things you want to see happen, and that's one of the goals that you would like to see, and if you work with the providers who would come in and say, these are the goals we want, these are things we want to see happen, the answer is yes. Where we get in trouble is when we don't have our goals that we take to providers and they just come in and do, which they should just come in and do what, but if we say, here's the goals, and those are the goals, then yes, those things like that are attainable.
So one question. So we have cells on our water tanks, water towers. So what would happen to those? I mean, they're paying us rent in order to be up there. So.
Yeah. So There's some options. It's hard to say because each deployment, every city's different, and each deployment is different. So what happens is that the providers, whether it's their, so if they're using something now, like a cell there, they would have to see, is that in their 4G network? Do I assume it would be, but that's my guess. And then they would say, okay, we're going to continue our 4G network until we have full coverage, so it'll be here for X, Y, and Z. Then the question will be, do they want to replace technology, or is it just obsolete at that point? And it just depends on what their rollout is. So it depends on a case by case.
Alderman Messina.
Maybe if you could just spend a minute maybe talking about that. I think it's super important. So I was telling the mayor, when I was in St. Louis, right, Google Fiber, if anybody really understood how much faster that is,
Yes.
but then becomes the obstacle of why there's only 25, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is because there's a lot of financial incentives that cities get, right? So we get money from some of these companies today for keeping the towers, right? So we forego some of that, and to your point, there is a massive investment on the part of, I won't say who, but think about some of these folks that pay us for that rental, basically. It's either pay us the rent or up the rent, or they have to pay millions upon millions of dollars to play competitively. That's why Google is having a hard time spreading this, even though it would be the best thing ever for the US. It just, why would I as a city forego and give up that money that I'm getting, rent money? I'm sorry, if you could speak maybe a minute to that?
Sure. So these, I mean, this is, like I said, this is transformational infrastructure. Just Verizon, I can say this because it was public. Verizon they did a purchase order at the beginning of 2018 for I think it was $1.5 billion just in glass, just in fiber. That was just the material, right? And that wasn't even for major. I mean, that was just for what their upcoming rollouts were going to be. The transformation of infrastructure takes huge amounts of money. So then it comes down to working with providers who want to come in to say, what do you have now? What do you want to put in? Does the city have any conduit that they could use, that they could lease from you? I mean, then it becomes a negotiation of what's the best for the city and for the provider, if you're being proactive. And money's on the table on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. And then, so that was step one again, that step one is kind of more defense, and that's how you can retain control. Of step two is more offense, and this is creating value for the future. And so this is an example. The Centennial, Colorado is an example, but there are different ways that, and this isn't necessarily just a 5G thing, but because fiber has to be in for 5G, there's some things to think about. Centennial went through, and one of our folks in our company is the one who actually put all this together, in Centennial. Centennial went through and put in conduit as part of their projects. They put in some fiber to connect signals and those sorts of things. And with that co-location, dig once programs, I mean, that's policy, but it's proactive, offense-driven policy. The broadband currency is the things they were putting in or had put in. And they ended up, for pennies on the dollar, they ended up putting in a network that ended up being worth, I think they had less than $1 million in it, and it ended up being worth like almost 20 million. Those numbers may not be exactly right, but it's close. And so going on offense is saying, okay, what policies do we want that manage, but what policies do we want that will attract? Do we want to do policies that help us get conduit in the ground, or those sorts of things that then we can use as currency in negotiating, because then you can get revenue off that. So there's, and then working with providers. And I just want to make a quick comment about providers. Again, I work across the country, and in dealing with providers, here's the things providers want. They want, and I don't want to completely speak for them, but this is just what they have told me and what I have seen them do. They want it to be predictable. They want it to be as quick as possible. And they're hoping it can be as cheap as possible, but that's actually third. And so if your policies are proactive, and if your policies are, and even the defense policies, as long as it's consistent and as long as it says this is the framework that we're working in, the providers, they're looking for that, because and they want to work with communities.
Mayor?
They don't want to take on community by community. They want to work with you.
So, I know this came up a couple of years ago. I think we even put it in strategic planning, and I know we had a couple guys come in and they put in some fiber and they rented, had to pay us some money. But is this so, what you're trying to tell us is we should have a plan and we should be laying out this empty conduit underground, correct? Is that where we're leading? So when they come to us, we're ready to go, right?
So here's great question, and here's the way I would answer that. Yes, and one thing is it's best to build the boat before you jump in the water. And so that's kind of getting this framework and the, what do we need to have in place, what our policies need to be, and so getting just kind of some basic, here's what we want to do to manage this. So you have that in place, particularly if permits come in, you want to be ready, and you want to have the right framework in place. In addition to that, in thinking about policies, being able to say, what, if we can do that, and if you can, all the better. But if we can set things like conduit in place, if we can have those ready, then you can actually, that does a couple things. One is it's a negotiation tool. The other is it starts directing it to where you want it to go. But you have to be proactive to be able to exercise those options.
Alderman Eugene Wesley?
I have one question. Jeff, maybe you can help me out. Aren't they laying fiber lines down Wooddale Road right now? And Addison Road, or what's going on with that? So someone's already jumping the gun on this project.
Go ahead, Director.
Yeah, there is currently a company that is laying some fiber optic down Irving Park Road, down Wooddale Road, down Addison Road. It's not clear to me exactly what their overall plan is for that. As you know, those are state and county roads. While we do review the permits, we don't actually approve them.
So the state and county, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So the state and county is probably already laying their lines now.
Go ahead.
My understanding is that's Everstream, which is a business-to-business provider. I'm not sure if they have 5G plans or not. That's not my area of expertise.
And I would just say that, as you move forward, and as you, again, we're starting with getting just some basic, getting the basics framework in place, getting the good defense so that this is managed, getting that in place is the starting point. But as you develop what you want to see happen, being able to go to the providers and say, let's talk about this, is a much more proactive way, and then you can kind of work on that together, instead of having those questions.
Alderman Jacob?
As far as with this 5G, what is the timing? Again, I'm not that savvy as Alderman Messina there either, but so the timeline from like 3G to 4G, I mean,
yeah.
In 2 years, maybe you're gonna come to us with 6G or 7G. I mean, what kind of time frame is in between all this technology?
That's a great question, and there's a big picture question there. And again, because it's a transformational change, 4G to 5G wasn't like 3G to 4G. Those were incremental changes where they were changing technology, they were changing things in devices, they were changing things, and this is like an infrastructure change. I mean, this is putting in fiber, putting in cells, putting them in every block. I mean, this is a big picture change. So my guess would be is that we will see 6G. I mean, but those won't be transformational changes. Those will be incremental changes to the infrastructure that's going in place, is everything I'm hearing. But to your question, timing is an interesting thing because right now it's being rolled out in places in like test beds or in small sections and that sort of thing. And these rollouts are going to take a while themselves. The question is, are you on the front edge of that? Are you in the middle of that? Or are you behind it? And are you managing it? But do I think the country will be blanketed in 5G in 5 years? I don't. I don't. This is going to big rollout, 100% coverage. That's all going to take a while.
Got a follow-up?
Yeah. Is this 5G? Have they tested like all this? Is this going to affect any interference with like the airlines with like their radar systems and stuff? Yeah. How does that have any effect on that?
Great question. So the answer is the spectrums they're using, they've delineated who gets what spectrum. And so, but even in addition to that, all devices go through labs and go through testing for a lot of things, including interference. So I think that's one reason why we've seen it rolled out in test beds first, is just checking all of those things that they thought they knew. But with the spectrum, with the rules, and with how it goes through labs, that's all being tested, checked, and there's a lot of steps before something hits the street.
Mayor?
I think Mr. Kroll had something to say.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna add that when you're looking at this stuff, and for layout and timeline, you can best believe the higher density areas, so northeastern Illinois is gonna be on the leading edge as opposed to the lag. So that's one thing to consider, and with where y'all are and O'Hare and the city, it's gonna happen sooner rather than later.
Mayor?
True, that's a good point.
So I got a question for you. So being that mostly AT&T landlines are disappearing, I know Irving Park is loaded with, because they used to do a lot of work right in front of my building. I'd see the guy in the vault and I'd walk over there just to see. I mean, he had a big minestrone of wires under there. And this pipe's running straight down Irving Park. It's already there. If they're no longer using that stuff, are they using that stuff still? I mean, maybe not as much, or not all of it? That's all encased in concrete. I mean, literally,
Yeah.
the vault, a few of us could stand in there, and the guy was working. I was watching. It's pretty impressive. But.
Yeah. It's hard to say because I don't know the facts. I mean, I don't know like the details, so.
Depending upon who it is, IDOT has fiber running down Irving Park Road to connect the
Already.
signals. That's the interconnect that you have 7 signals connected down Irving. There's lots of folks that are gonna have they're trying to get customers. So whether it be AT&T or Verizon or whatever, the whole point in this offensive game plan is putting in a package, a duct package, and it could be your first provider coming, let's say it's Verizon. They only need one conduit to run all their fiber through. And you've got, if it's a 3x3, you've got 8 others that are vacant. So 6 months downstream, AT&T wants to come in because they're going to compete for the same customers. Rather than them digging up your parkway again, well, now you tell them, well, you're going to get this conduit line and you're going to charge them because you've paid for putting that in. Verizon came in, they were going to put in one, you paid for the empty conduit, they were already opening a hole in the ground, cost you pennies on the dollar to put that whole package in, but now you don't tear it up, and the infrastructure, the backbone is there. You just feed the...
Just to give you a feel of that, digging the trench costs like $30 a foot, or somewhere in there, 25 to 30 bucks a foot. To put a conduit in an open trench costs about $2 a foot. So, I mean, we're talking like huge difference. But I just want to say, too, so fiber is an interesting thing because there's the way to think of in terms of fiber is there's transmission fiber and distribution fiber, just like electric. And so sometimes fiber, where I live, down the road in front of me is a whole bunch of fiber to go east-west, but none of us to serve any of our customers. Not to serve anybody like us, because it's for transmission, and then what goes off of it is distribution. So like in the case of those vaults and stuff, Chicago has a lot of stuff, a lot of data comes in, and fiber comes into Chicago. I mean, that could be just transmission, or that could be just transmission fiber too, just going to the co-location places. But odds are if they had that kind of infrastructure, they're still using it somehow.
Okay.
You have follow-up, Mayor?
No, that was it. I mean, so if they're, unfortunately, I'm probably one of the few that still has a landline, right? But
I got one.
But if 90% of the people are getting away from landlines, these pipes are sitting with these old wires that are doing absolutely nothing. Why would we dig up everything when the stuff is right there?
You know, as part of an offense, it's possible to go to providers and say, look, is there anything you're not using? And therefore, could we repurpose that? I mean, those are things you can do. That just takes proactivity, you know, it takes being proactive.
Alderman Woods?
Thank you. So I think Ron touched on part of it, but this is all about being proactive and managing our real estate. I look at it as a developer buying lots, that right away are our lots, and what we put in that ground. If you were developing it as a community, everybody comes in and puts a road, a water line in, a sewer line, you know, cable TV and a telephone line in the past. This is the future, this is where everything's going. And whether we use the existing vaults or whatever, but we need to develop a plan of where that backbone's gonna run and how we wanna do that. And as we watch all these big buildings go up, it's a perfect opportunity when they open up the right of way to get stuff in, even if it's bits and pieces. Even if it's only 1,000 feet that you get in, it's 1,000 feet you didn't have to dig up. And we just make that part of our program and chip away at it. And so when you look at, I think Eugene mentioned them, which alerted me again, that, you know, everybody's doing this stuff, running down Addison Road, running down, which is exactly what I said we need to do. And if we don't get out in front of it, that right away is gonna get it chewed up pretty quickly. And as I was talking about last night, I was lucky enough to talk to an attorney that was involved in this for a vendor, nameless, and we had a nice conversation from his side, the issues, and just as Ed, right? Ken, sorry, pointed out, you know, everybody wants that predictability. The cost isn't as much, so if we want to add a few things to it, that's our spec. They don't really care as long as you can, it's predictable and they can calculate what return on investment is. When everything's unknown, there's no way to calculate that, right? So then everybody bypasses that community and goes somewhere else where, you know, the entry points and the resistance is less. So I think that that's the big thing is you put out there, and whether it comes in 2 months, 6 months, 3 years, it is coming. And it's coming faster and faster. You know, the safety, the 911, you know, all those connections, airports, you know, and we have to manage the little bit of real estate we have to benefit from that. So if we lose the tower, we can rent that duct in the ground, and if that means we buy AT&T's old vaults to run something through them, right, and cancel their right away. Those are the deals we'll be making.
Alderman Jacob?
As far as the cost of all this, I mean, if we put together a plan and went to Verizon and said, okay, we're ready for this, is the city gonna have to put a bunch of dollars into this, or would Verizon say, okay, thank goodness we're gonna come and we're gonna take care of all this for you and there's not gonna be any cost to the city?
So that'll be up to you, actually. And in most deployments, it's working with the providers on plans for what they're going to do and the expense they're going to make. So it's kind of one way to think about it is if there's things you want to control, like where it goes and that sort of thing, and you want to have duct in place to kind of, you know, so there could be some costs like that if you choose to do that. A lot of deployments, it's more just working with providers to make sure that everything's fair and according to the you know, and that doesn't cost the city anything. So there'll be some decisions of things you could make to try to put incentives, like putting in conduit, like, you know, that could make things more favorable to what you want. But those will be decisions you could make, but it doesn't have to cost you a penny, actually, you know.
Follow
It
up?
just depends on what control you want to have.
Follow-up?
Yes, I guess my question is, we want to be one of the top 50 cities in the United States. Are we going to have people knocking on our doors saying, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to pay for everything, we're going to do all this, you give us the rules that you have? Is that how it works?
So every community is different. Everything's different. I work with one community that they decided, because they were really concerned about the right-of-way, they wanted to put in a duct bank, and they were willing to upfront that cost, but they lease it back to their providers. That was a decision they made because of certain goals they had. I'm working with another one that just had a meeting today where the question was, look, we think we have good enough real estate, and we think that there's reasons why providers would want to be here, so we're going to go talk to them, but we don't really expect to put anything into it. You know, part of the process, again, we're talking just kind of getting some basic things in place right now, but at some point down the road, if you wanted to think through, we've got some goals and we want to bring people here faster, therefore we'll put in conduit because that's a negotiating tool to get people here faster. You can do that, but that'll be your call along the way. Does that make sense?
Alderman Woods?
Yeah, so I'll try to help. So again, developing the plan and determining where that backbone's gonna be, right? So that's public information, so the networks can look at that and see what's going on. And being proactive would be the next step and starting to put it in the ground. That as soon as they know that project's underway, they're more likely than not to come and go, hey, when you're done, we want 2 ducts. After that, we might do just one main run, whether that's Addison Road, Wooddale Road, Irving Park Road, whatever road it is, Central Avenue. And then they can see that we're vested. They go, okay, well, we'll buy 2 ducts there, and then we'll run the ducts over here, you know, and make a deal. So don't charge us for permits, give us some help on something else, work back and forth. But having the plan in place, right, determining what that plan is, and then starting to execute, whether that's small pieces when we do a development, add it as part of our road project when we do a road. It's not that hard. You got everything's torn up to run a trencher out there and do 2 blocks of fiber or duct or whatever it is.
And it's like Centennial, I was giving you that the example I gave. Now that's a big footprint. They did decide to put money in because they thought if we put money in these conduits in these different places, then we'll be able to lease that or sell it later. And they were right. They were able to. And so they've made money off of it. I mean, they've ended up in the positive. So I think that's a good way of saying it is that as those projects come along the different places, if it fits into your plan and you think that will either be a good negotiating tool and or can even be a source of revenue, then you make the decision to put it in as you go.
Let me, if I could just
Go ahead.
one thing. So, because I'm interested in this subject matter, smart cities, 5G, fiber, and building, but watching them come down Addison Road and analyzing what they did. They were under the ground, then they jumped up and went to poles, came back down, went down side streets instead of continuing down a main road. I mean, they came down my street, they went underground, probably 50% of the time, hopped up, back up on the poles, went a couple houses, dropped back down. So obstacles. So when they're planning these out, right, there's a lot of things in the way and calculating what those costs are, and is it easier to go under something, around it, whether it's gas, sewer, whatever's there, or is there a pole and can we go on that? So that's why, in my opinion, it's important that we determine what that is. You know, do we ultimately want the dunk bank in there, and if 3x3 or 4x4, and when a new building comes up, we get 400 feet in. When we do a road project, we got 400 feet, so they can see on a map, they can connect the 1,200 feet in between, right? That's certainly way cheaper and beneficial to them. I mean, that's how I see it working out, and we're gonna have to put something in, but not a lot, because we'll get most of those developers to help us putting in as they're doing developments too.
Okay, Mayor, do your question, and then let him finish the presentation. Go ahead.
Actually, I think he's pretty much done. I think he's looking for a motion to approve tasks 1, 2, through 3.
I'll make a motion to approve
And at
tasks
the-
1, 2, and 3.
Second.
At the kickoff meeting, then I would imagine that's when we just say what we want or whatnot, right? I take it. Okay.
Well, so the kickoff is to lay some of that groundwork and to start those discussions. And that's more just kind of making sure we're on the same page and have, you know, that we're all know what we're going to do in steps 2 and 3. There are some potential add-on things, you know, that you could do. And like if you wanted to go into a full visioning we could probably do part of, we could do part of that in the kickoff, but we would just want to make sure we're clear on what the goals were, what you wanted out of that particular meeting.
Go ahead, Mayor.
So are you asking, because you got the potential add-ons, cost recovery study, is that where we charge? Is that what you're talking? So,
Manager?
At this point in time, staff was really just recommending 1 through 3. We'll get this ball rolling. It's $18,000, and then we'll come back to you if we need some more guidance.
okay.
So we have a motion and a second?
Yes, we do.
Okay, roll call, please.
Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
In the motion, I believe there wasn't a dollar amount, but
It's 18,000 when you add up tasks 1 through.
Right.
It's 1 through
But it-
3 task is 18,000.
It said task 1, 2, 3, so
Not to exceed, right?
not that cheap.
Right.
not to exceed 2 million.
Okay. No. Roll call.
Alderman Sorrentino?
Yes.
Alderman Jacob?
Yes.
Alderman Woods?
Yes.
Alderman Sismarski?
Yes.
Alderman Eugene Wesley? Alderman Catalano?
Yes.
Alderman Messina?
Yes.
Yes. And thank you for your presentation. Go ahead, Ron, you had a question?
Just kind of wrapping things up, one way to look at this, when you have your roadway corridor and you have your right-of-way, it's especially on your municipal streets, that's right-of-way that y'all own. It's valuable real estate, and there's a finite amount of things that can fit within said right-of-way. Kind of piggybacking on to something y'all approved a little earlier, which was the complete the streets. In my estimation, this is that next layer of complete the streets. Because again, you have that finite amount of right-of-way. You have a roadway, you have sidewalk, you have a multi-use trail, you have curb and gutter, you have storm sewer, you have water main. Here, you could have a fiber bank or whatever. It's managing your right-of-way, and it's, once you put this in, you're gonna locate it with GIS, you're gonna know where it is. It's not like, oh, it's maybe 5 feet behind the back curb. This is where it is, because it's gonna be surveyed in, and this is gonna be information that you know. Because once this is in, you don't wanna have somebody messing around with a backhoe and clipping this stuff, so.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, next is request of authority of, for 50% cost share for the city sewer line-in at 428 Knollwood Drive in the amount not to exceed $14,221. That is my motion.
Second.
Any questions? Alderman Woods?
Explain to me what we're doing. Is this a private sewer?
Go ahead.
Why do we?
Thank you, Chairman. This is actually, the building department received a building application for a new single-family home located at 428 Knollwood. We have an 8-inch sanitary sewer that the city owns that runs across that property, and given the proximity of the new development to our sewer, we asked that they line our sewer as a stipulation for this building application, and they agreed to share the cost with us.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the paperwork I looked said they're lining a 12-inch sewer, but it's an 8-inch sewer?
Yeah, that's actually an error on, so it's
Yeah.
actually going to be underneath that 14,000 mark once they get the right dimension.
And so, to be devil's advocate, why are we making that guy line the city's sewer?
Given the location of where he's planning to build, it's right on top of our easement, pretty much there, in close proximity to our sewer. So, given the likelihood, the age of the main, that we would have to do repairs there or line it in the future, we stipulated that if he wanted to build on that location, he would be responsible for lining it.
Is,
Go
so
ahead.
is there a granted easement there, and that pipe is in the granted easement?
There is an existing easement, correct?
Okay. Thank you.
It's a unique location.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's a very unique spot to build a home, so, yeah,
I saw it, and I'm like, I wasn't quite sure of all the
by
particulars.
the bird
so
sanctuary.
Thanks.
Is that
Forest.
surrounded by forest preserve?
There's a bird sanctuary behind it. You're basically in the forest. Yeah, and there's a bird sanctuary, which is,
Okay,
With the new lift station.
yeah, where we put the new lift station, yeah.
so we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
No, yeah, we do.
Yep.
Alderman Sorrentino?
Yes.
Alderman Jacob?
Yes.
Alderman Woods?
Yes.
Alderman Sismarski?
Yes.
Alderman Eugene Wesley?
Yes.
Alderman Catalano?
Yes.
Alderman Messina?
Yes.
Okay, items to consider for at future meetings. We have Elizabeth Drive Bridge Phase 1 coming up in March or April 2020. Any other future items to consider? If there's none, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, call to order the Public Health, Safety, Judiciary, and Ethics Committee. What, did the mayor take off on us?
Yep.
Okay, well then, we don't need another roll call. His vote's not counting anyway tonight. So we'll call it to order. It's just been called, the roll call. We don't need to do that. The same people are here. I need an approval of the minutes of the meeting of January 9th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Report and recommendation, we're going to go to the chief on items 1 and items 2. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item up is a request to replace our current community service officer pickup trucks, vehicle 411 and 412. Though they are currently 2012 Ford F-150 Super Cabs, which has the, it's not a crew cab, which is the full-size back door, but kind of the in-between. That's worked well for us over the last 8 years because sometimes they do transport. They have a child safety seat in there, so sometimes children from scenes or whatever it is. So we do need that back seat. So we're looking to replace it with 2020 Ford F-150 Super Cab 4x4s. Our current ones are 4x4 also. We would then outfit those with a truck cap like the current ones are. This is a competitive bid that's done through the Northwest Municipal Conference, so it has gone through that process. And then one of the current CSO vehicles, we would probably transition that over to what we currently use for our volunteers and our special events, just for the extra equipment. So we would be then getting rid of a 2006 community service officer vehicle that's used for that extra equipment now, so getting rid of a 14-year-old vehicle.
Alderman Jacob?
I'm going to make a motion to approve, replace the community office vehicle number 411 and 412 in the amount not to exceed $53,910.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Take a roll.
He's good.
I'm sorry, Chief.
And sorry, I forgot to mention, it was in my memo, we do have one of these in this year's budget, one in the May 1 budget, but it's a part of the overall SURF. But with the order lag time, these would both arrive probably around late April to early May. So we're just looking to order them both at the same time rather than do one now and come back in 2 months and do the same order again.
Alderman Messina.
You answered one of my questions, but the other question was, what was the actual score? Do we have a SURF score on those vehicles?
Yeah, out of 60 points, one of the vehicles is 32 and one is 37. So we would probably get rid of the 32 and the 37 would end up the one that's going to replace the 2006 vehicle as a, for our utility stuff.
Okay.
Alderman Wesley, question?
Chief, can't we, in the next purchase we go, can't we stagger these there so we don't have to buy two at one time? Is there a way we can do that?
Well, with these, because we're going to outfit them at the same time, we separated them out when we first did the SURF 3-4 years ago, and just to kind of try to keep the funding equal. We did have them split in the year, but now that we're doing one, it's just easier to get both of them outfitted with the truck caps, everything done all at once. We look at the vehicles every year, and we make adjustments. There's some that we thought were going to be 3 years old, and we've been stretching them to 4 years. So every year that we do try and reprioritize and look at the scoring and what needs to be replaced. So.
Alderman Catalano?
I see some of the vehicles have rust problems. Don't we have a Z-Part like they used to in the old days? I mean,
Chief?
Yeah, I know these have started showing some rust. I don't think we've really had that on any of the Ford utility vehicles that we've had. So hopefully the new 2020 models, we won't run into as many problems. So.
okay.
Any more questions? There's been a motion and a second to proceed here as written. Roll call, please.
Alderman Sorrentino?
Yes.
Alderman Jacob?
Yes.
Alderman Woods?
Yes.
Alderman Sismarski?
Yes.
Alderman Eugene Wesley?
Yes.
Alderman Catalano?
Yes.
Alderman Messina?
Yes.
And that passes. Item number 2 there, Chief, please take it.
Thank you. The second thing is we're looking for the approval to purchase a unmarked vehicle. And this would be a Ford utility, or Ford Interceptor utility vehicle, similar to the vehicle that I drive and one of the deputy chiefs drive. We're looking to replace that. This is another competitive bid through the Northwest Municipal Conference, but we'd be purchasing this one through Curry Motors. The one that it would be, as we rotate through the fleet, would be replacing a 2011 Ford Taurus, which is used on a regular basis in investigations now. And then what we would probably do is probably hold on to that one for a little while as a pool vehicle. We have things between trainings, and other things that we're frequently either using another pool vehicle. We'll probably hold on to this one for a couple more years and then sell it at auction when it's ready to go to auction.
Chief, the cost that we're looking at here, that's the full vehicle all completely dressed with the equipment, isn't it?
So what this has in it is some of the lighting and preparation for the emergency vehicle equipment. We still have to take things to an outfitter to add some undercover lighting, put in the controls for that. This doesn't have a cage or any of the other stuff that is much more expensive. These don't have that. But you're probably another couple $1,000s worth of equipment and labor to do that, and then we take that out of our regular vehicle maintenance budget.
Okay, so that's covered then.
Yes.
Okay, Alderman Jacob.
Is this for the detectives, or is this for one of the chiefs, or?
Chief?
So yeah, what we do, this will be for Deputy Chief O'Neill be driving it, and then what we do is we rotate that, I can't remember what that vehicle number is, into detectives, and then we rotate out from there. So that's been our process for the last 20-some years.
Follow up?
Yeah, just, we have that one car that's kind of a covert, I don't know, is that a detective car, or is that a street, the one truck that we have that's kind of like a silver, like a tan?
Chief?
That is, that's a car that we use pretty much during the week, and it's a traffic car. We use it for special grant details too. That's our truck enforcement vehicle too. So it's just another option for patrol, unmarked stuff that we can use. Like I said, it's used Monday to Friday during the truck enforcement and that type of stuff, but then we use it on when we're doing special details or on the weekends sometimes for undercover use. But that one's got a spotlight and everything else. It's pretty apparent that it's a police vehicle when people see it, and it's got the police plates.
It doesn't have the cage in it too, the bars in that too, or no?
I don't think that one has the cage.
No? Okay, I was just curious. I didn't know if that was a detective or a street.
No, that's a street vehicle.
It is a street, okay.
Yep.
It's an unmarked undercover car. Did you want to put the plates out there too tonight? Any more questions regarding this?
Why is it gotta be black?
Secret score.
All right, roll call, Eileen, please. Oh, did we make a motion on this guy?
It's gonna be black.
Oh, okay. I'll make a motion that we purchase this unmarked vehicle to replace vehicle 416 in an amount not to exceed $33,933. Any more questions regarding this vehicle, gentlemen? Okay, then let's have a roll call. Eileen?
Alderman Sorrentino?
Yes.
Alderman Jacob?
Yes.
Alderman Woods?
Yes.
Alderman Sismarski?
Yes.
Alderman Eugene Wesley?
Yes.
Alderman Catalano?
Yes.
Alderman Messina?
Yes.
And that passes. Items to be considered at future meetings? Anything, anyone? Okay, then I'll make the motion for an adjournment. Anybody want to second that, or?
Second.
Kick it around a while. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, Chief. Great job.
Calling the Planning, Zoning, and Building Committee to order. Let the minute taker note that the same people are present. I'm sorry, Alderman Sismarski stepped out for a moment. Make a motion to approve the minutes of January. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Report and recommendation, new streetlight banner program. Mr. Cage?
Thank you, Chairman. I know it's the extended hour, so I will try and get through this fairly quickly.
Take your time.
I will
Good
start
prep for the
by...
budget talks.
So this is obviously an issue that was discussed prior to Streetscape meeting. I'll take someone else's line because it's better than mine. I was not in the room where it happened. I know there are other people who were, most notably Alderman Art Woods. So if I speak out of turn, please jump in and correct me. And let's move... plan would be to move right along, but... There we go. Okay, so, yes, as I mentioned, this is a, discussed it as, obviously, these are for the proposed roads along Irving Park Road and Wooddale Road. Streetscape approved some revision to the banner designs. I will get to those, we'll have some slides to cover those various banners. Streetscape also approved the banner locations, obviously on Irving Park Road and Wooddale Road. We have a slide that will cover that. And then the other kind of key aspect to it is the cost to install or to purchase, and then whether the banners will be installed in-house or by an outside vendor. And so we'll go through these fairly quickly. Obviously, these are the banners in question. Obviously, we have a variety. Patriotic would be one. Obviously, you know, what are we talking? We're talking July 4th. We're talking Memorial Day, Veterans Day, etc. Moving on, then we get to the...
Alderman Catalano?
Yeah, what happened to the American
Flag, I mean, that doesn't look like 4th of July or Memorial Day, or, I mean, why do we choose something like this?
I would agree with Alderman Catalano on that one.
Yeah, thank you.
Way to
I mean,
keep
can
it-
we make that change? I mean,
Mr. Cage?
That's, not sure what the discussion was at Streetscape at the time. I know that they did revise a number of these.
Yeah.
Maybe,
I like that one.
I mean, that's an excellent point. Maybe that's something that we can run up another design for to add into the rotation.
Alderman Messina?
And not to pat my own back, but I brought this idea way back when, and the whole intent was really around Memorial Day and 4th of July to really commemorate our veterans. And I had shown and even provided pictures of this is what good should look like, and it was honoring certain veterans that live in our city. So I don't know how this morphed, but it morphed out of that into...
Just so you know, Alderman Messina, I did bring that up. I think this was before I got on Streetscape.
Yeah, it's...
So this was, but Alderman Woods was on Streetscape at the time, so.
Yeah, it just seems like it's morphed. I don't care. I don't need credit. I'm just saying it just feels like it's morphed from what it was originally intended for to a Crane coloring book.
Yeah, I think this was brought up again before I brought that up to, but we'll let. Alderman Woods? I'm sorry.
Yeah. These predate your suggestion. That's it in a nutshell. This was going on at the same time that we were rebranding the city. And just thinking of the clock tower, this was done years ago now. Yeah, I mean, so this wasn't last week. This is being brought forward from, this is 2 years old. So that, I hope that answers the question.
Alderman Sizmarsky?
Yeah, I brought some up before too. I don't know if it just went to the wayside, but they had the hometown heroes also where residents could purchase or co-purchase a co-op on a banner and have their loved one or whoever served up there during the time of Memorial Day, Veterans Day. I don't know if that's even an option, but
And I do think Alderman Woods answered that this predates Alderman Messina recommended that other thing to me, which I
that
brought
was
up at
like 6, 7 years
Streetscape,
ago.
which was probably 4 or 5 months ago. And this sounds like it was from 2 years ago.
Right, so,
Alderman?
thank you. So this doesn't mean that we can't add something to the rotation? But this is the plan that was developed a couple of years back that's being brought forward. So it's not like that we wouldn't use these. And I guarantee you, if we have this conversation in a year, we'll be changing some of those too. I mean, they were both good ideas. The one that whoever brought it up, you, Pete, Randy, I'll give everybody credit with the veterans and the pictures, right? I know that we kind of vetted that out a little bit. We didn't take it to a conclusion yet, but who are those people? How do we get the pictures? Do they want the picture up there? Do they not want the picture up there? And then this is coming down the stream that we have to move forward and do something. We're not eliminating the other thing. That could still come forward. There's nothing wrong with adding another 6 banners in rotation or adding some other things to the list of banners in there. I mean, this won't be the last time that we order these things. They don't last forever either.
Grant?
Yeah, just to add on to what Alderman Woods is saying, these colored banners with the leaves on them would be intermixed with advertising banners, every other one. And then the plan is that once we get this established and in place, we would develop the veterans program that Alderman Messina is talking about as well. And that would take the place of the advertising banners, in which we would incorporate, the Hometown Heroes theme, the American flag theme, things like that. For the time being, though, we just wanted to get these out there, establish the city's branding, use patriotic colors, that kind of thing, and then we would add to that as we go.
Mayor?
Yeah. This has been going on a long time. We started this with Prairie Fest. We had like 6 or 8 banners at Wooddale and Irving. And everybody at that time says, wouldn't it be nice if we could rotate? And unfortunately, it's taken a long time.
Long time.
Long time. I mean, we added some fall ones or autumn ones, a few handful. I think we bought like a 20 or 15 something. But we've been trying to improve this program, and it'll get better as we move along. But branding has been kind of up in the forefront, and I think that's why Streetscape went towards the Leafs, right? This is, we're branding the city. So when the people see this, they're going to say, we're in Wooddale.
Alderman Sizmarsky?
You want to make a motion to adopt the new streetlight banner program as is with some fine tuning adjustments later in time for the Hometown Hero.
Second.
With the outside install and maintenance?
Yeah.
Is that the way the motion should be, Mr.
I believe
Cage?
so.
Cage?
Well, there was no monetary value. I didn't know if you
Correct,
guys had one.
so just to kind of jump ahead, so I think probably the
It's
two
branding our town,
things
so.
that will highlight some of the things we've discussed about location-wise that Grant just mentioned. Seasonal, obviously in the blue, more kind of advertisement, or in the red, which obviously shop and dine local. So I think that illustrates it location-wise. And then the last point, which we Alderman Woods just covered, which is, obviously these, we're talking just over 400 banners. Obviously, these are the breakdown of the costs. This is the cost we're talking about, using an outside vendor to install the banners, and then this would be the not-to-exceed cost right here.
Alderman Sizmarsky?
Yeah, I'll just amend that motion to not exceed $40,000.
Would the seconder agree?
Randy?
Seconder? Yes, no?
Myself, yeah.
I amended
I
the motion
said
not to exceed $40,000.
Right.
Oh,
I heard, yeah.
okay.
Well, you gave a wave, we weren't quite sure.
Oh, no. That's-
Mayor?
No,
Oh.
Eugene's first.
Eugene? Alderman Wesley?
I just have a couple of questions. Go back to the flags, first, please. Why my opinion, the spring one looks identical to the summer one, to the autumn one. There's gotta be something else.
They don't look identical, they have different colors.
That's the only thing that changed on them.
Right.
I mean, I.
Kinda like the
Kind of like
season.
the season, the
Well, I mean,
leaves.
on spring, you should put flowers on it maybe, the clock tower or something else. I mean, they all the same identical. All they're doing is changing the color.
I would actually agree with Alderman E. Wesley, just like I agree with Alderman Catalano.
Thank you. I mean, that's the only thing I'm saying.
Mr. Murmas?
I would just note, going back to some previous comments, that these are kind of like the template banners. There's going to be other banners, and we're trying to promote the logo and trying to remain consistent. So just a subtle change of color, I think, does a good job with that, in addition to some of the other specialized banners that we're going to put up there. And I would also say that this has been a long time coming, multitude of reasons. Council has been a little indecisive with branding. Staff has been trying to coordinate this with the new street poles, et cetera, et cetera. And what you have out there is banners that look like they're from 1975. So I would definitely say
Because
this
they
is
are.
a big improvement.
Look at them from 1980.
Alderman Catalano?
So the brackets and the double brackets, we're spending close to about nearly $9,000. The existing brackets on there, are they going to be using the existing brackets, or will they, because I know there's going to be more banners put up, I understand that. So the brackets that are already up there, what are they going to do with those? I mean, are they going to be the same dimension of the banners that are going up?
Here comes Alan.
Put them on
Here comes our
market,
Public Works Director.
put them on Marketplace.
I think I had him.
We thought, just for the sake of continuity, to have everything have the same aesthetic appeal, that we would replace the existing 14 brackets and banding.
14.
That's what they,
14 is what we currently have, correct?
and you're going to make sure they do replace them?
Absolutely.
Alderman Woods?
Yeah, I was just gonna address, going back, Jeff covered most of the thing, but it really was about the branding, and this isn't those ones with the leaves and the just subtle color changes to the season aren't every pole going up and down the street. They're intermittent with the other ones, and in the future, adding the veterans or adding the flag. So it's not gonna be the only thing that you see, but that does tie into the branding that we all kinda agreed on.
So just one quick question. Memorial
Alderman
Day
Catalano.
and 4th of July, we are going to have the American flag up there.
Not this year.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, could we look at that patriotic one and at least maybe change that one a little bit?
No.
It's red, white, and blue.
Okay.
It's red, white, and blue.
Alderman Messina?
So it's essentially, basically, we're dressing these poles, right? They're $65 a banner. That's what we have to look at it. So you want yourself a new sport coat, go ahead and grab it. We'll change it up. This is the foundation to get started. I think we're overthinking. If you guys go back one slide and just keep that up there and we can analyze that, all your questions may be answered. Where you break down the costs. There's 335 banners. We're gonna get a bunch of them. It's gonna be like changing clothes, I hope. And we will change them out. Is that correct?
Grant?
Yeah, also, we have to keep in mind, these aren't going to last forever. You know, they'll get several years of use out of them, but they'll have to be redone every few years. We'll update the different designs as we go. And the colors actually were chosen by Streetscape. We presented a variety of options, and these are the ones that they actually chose in the end, and that's why they are what we have here.
Alderman Messina?
Is there a chance of weaving in, to Alderman Catalano's point, some of those flags? I know you said you're going to stagger those.
Mr. Murmas?
I think what we can, it's probably not that complicated to weave in some American flag banners as we work towards the veteran banners. Those would be more complex, and that would take time. But to add in some flag banners, I don't think would be a problem.
Mayor?
So Alderman Sismarski made the motion for 40,000, so at $65, I think we can buy a few flag ones and put them in.
That's why I rounded it.
That's not the end of the world. I mean,
Let's not
I
make
rounded
this
it up.
take
I mean-
another year to pass.
Right,
Please.
let's.
I think you said it correctly. We'll buy a couple more shirts.
Right.
One side.
Peter's face on it.
Any more questions?
So we are gonna have a flag.
That's why he asked if it was.
We might not
Mr.
have it by Memorial Day, but we're gonna order some. We put 40,000 in. You got almost $3,000. How many can you buy?
He's gonna make
At
$40,000.
$65.
Can we make sure we get some?
Look, the manager already made a
American
note.
flags
Don't worry
in
about
there?
it, guys, it's done.
Okay, perfect.
It's done.
Okay.
Roll call.
I don't know how fast we're gonna get.
Roll call.
Okay, call the question, oral call, please.
Alderman Sorrentino?
Yes.
Alderman Jacob?
Yes.
Alderman Woods?
Thank you and yes.
Alderman Sismarski?
Yes.
Alderman Eugene Wesley? Alderman Catalano? Alderman Messina?
Yes.
Now
That
you get no
passes.
flag.
Items to be considered at future meetings. Engineering standards, March 12th, 2020. SBT Bank redevelopment, March and April 2020. Airbnb regulations, April of 2020.
over in there.
Do we have anything else we'd like to see on that? Okay, with none being,
Hang on
oh.
1 second. Ordering the flag banners.
Alderman Woods? Oh, okay. I make the motion to adjourn. All in favor? Okay.